Thank you very much for attending our session today. I think you're in for a real treat. This is a really dynamic group. I'm going to just quickly introduce everybody on the session so that you can understand the synergies, the compatibility, and why this is such a dynamic group. So with me today I have Todd Harrison. He's at Sony at the moment, and a little bit of his background is that he's the head of talent and resourcing with 22 years of experience in HR. Then I also have Debbie Whitmore. So Faye could not be here today. Debbie is very kindly in her stead. Debbie is at McGill. She's the Director of HR Europe for McDermott. And she's primarily supporting operators that develop their assets like BP, Total. Then I have Imraan Arbee with me today. Imraan is the founder of Arbee Partners. They're talent sourcing, so executive search. And he joins us with 23 years of recruitment and search experience. And then Jean Martin. Jean is Mercer's global product leader, and she joined Mercer in 2018 from Gardner and corporate executive board with 22 years building businesses. So one of the things that we started off with in one of the earlier sessions today, I think Ronan mentioned it, but when we were looking at the future workforce, the younger generations coming on board, one of the things that Ronan said that really resonated with me was that younger people, as they enter the workforce, are being held accountable more for their own decisions. And I think that also resonates with some of the conversations that we've been having individually and in preparation for this today, the panel, because I truly believe that younger people are also holding their leadership teams more accountable. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that, about the future workforce, the accountability, and where you would like to get started. Maybe I'll toss that first to you, Todd, and see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I would absolutely agree. I mean, what I'm finding is with the new people that we're bringing into Sony, that they have specific things that they're looking for. They really want to see a development plan in place. They want to know about our ESG, what we're doing for the environment, the social, the governance. They also want to find out how we rate and develop our own employees and our management, and what programs the managers are going to be putting them through. It's very common for them to be already talking about that next step in that workforce. So they want to go to an organization that really has that depth and breadth.
Absolutely.
I'm finding.
Imraan, I'm looking at you because you've said quite a few things in the last couple of days that I think feed off of this really nicely also. You were saying about the sort of the short grasp and the long term, the quick turnaround in roles.
Yeah, well, I think if you were to look back at people's career trajectories previously, everyone used to think longer term, sticking with a company. And if you look at just a couple of generations ago, you could be a lifer, which shortly was reduced to 10 years, and then 5. And I think now if you can attract talent and keep them within a role, even for 24 months, you get the most out of them within that. And I think you then have to be able to offer them the internal challenges of moving either within their function upwards or identifying their talent to move them across. So I think you're seeing far more movement and expectation of movement within the younger generation so that they are progressing. Now I think one of the frustrations from a client point of view is that traditionally you expect people to serve their time a little bit more and not necessarily to run before they can walk. But that's, once again, it's a generational thought process as opposed to the potential that they have to take on new tasks at an earlier stage.
To build on that, I mean, one of the things that people, individuals that are aged like 18 to 25, their average tenure is only 2.8 years. So companies need to get used to changing their thought about retention. And one of the things that I'm trying to get across to our managers is that just because somebody is leaving the organization and maybe is going to another place, look at that as potentially they're going to learn when they go to that other place. If you're treating them well and you're treating them, giving them those opportunities and celebrating them, even as they're leaving, they will be coming back to you in another 2.8 years, and they're that much better off because they still want to work for you. So I think we kind of have to unthink of, change the way we're thinking of retention. And I'm really focusing on boomerang people coming back in and alumni groups and making sure that we're staying in touch with those people, because that it's nature, it's what's happening. So otherwise I'm going to be fighting against it.
And I think from our perspective in an engineering environment, that poses some quite tricky challenges for us, because when we get entry-level people in, they need to go on a journey, a learning journey, so they can deliver for the clients. And I think what you were saying about planning their development and giving them the internal challenge, that is becoming such a high point focus for us, and I know our competitors as well, to keep them in, to get them through the learning process. And then yes, so they rebound then around all of the competitors and bring that experience back. We do see that, but up to this point we've been able to keep them while they're training, let them go, they come back, but now, you're right, the pressure in the shorter term is so much greater from this generation. I don't think we've got all the answers, but certainly the development focus is absolutely vital for us, and the projects we work on.
Absolutely. I know at Mercer, we've just completed our Global Talent Trends Study, which is a survey of several thousand executives, HR leaders, and employees around the world. And what's been very interesting is the change generationally toward demands on the employer I join. So 96% of employees under the age of 30 want a visible commitment to sustainability and diversity and inclusion. And that's a very high number compared to prior years. So we think that's post-pandemic been rising. But we also know that more than 80% of employees will commit to alumni programs and actually show enthusiasm for that on the point of leaving, so during the departure interview from a company. So that means there's an enormous asset of talent in the talent ecosystem that can be sourced through this, as you said, Todd, more of a porous wall, where we start to think, okay, this individual may need to go to another company, even a competitor or a nonprofit or government position, and then return. And keeping that network vital and active, and keeping our employment value proposition visible and vibrant for that individual becomes very, very interesting. And it's quite funny, a number of our heads of HR are saying, we thought we'd be moving to gig work where we don't have a long-term social contract. Actually, the way it's playing out, the long-term social contract is still there. It's just that I need to follow this individual across their next 3 or 4 employment moves and then bring them back to contribute further to our organization. So I think it speaks really hopefully for the development potential and the career growth for this next generation.
But importantly, you've got to treat them right
Yes.
while you've got them, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there's no point in trying to turn that on only at the end of the process.
Yeah.
Their expectation is the journey throughout.
Right.
But that puts a burden on the company, and that's a real challenge, because in many ways you're giving them their first. If it's raw talent, you're giving them their first opportunities, and it's a lot of effort and resource vested in them.
Yes.
Without the guaranteed return.
Right.
So you've got to find that balance, and then be able to use them to also open their networks, because if you're an employer of choice, they'll refer you to other people.
Yeah.
And then you've got you've got that channel multiplying, really.
Yes, and there may be customers in the future as well. Yeah. So we're talking a lot with leadership teams about over-invest in the first 12 months to 18 months of a person's joining. If you can really focus the resourcing and really win them in their discretionary effort and enthusiasm, you'll get a lifetime value from that individual. We've been talking about the move from ROI on talent, return on investment, to net present value on talent, thinking about decades-long relationships with individuals. Yeah, fully agree.
I think, Debbie, there was something you said to me in one of our earlier conversations that often what you're finding is that when people leave the organization, it's because they're going to look for new skills or a new experience, but they're coming back as well. Is that something you're seeing also?
We do see that, and the organisations like ours were project-based, and obviously the opportunities that we have are really driven by the types of projects we can secure. So again, it's another challenge that we face. If we can't provide the right challenge, sometimes it's better to let people go, even though we don't necessarily want to lose them. Let them go off. But like you say, if you're good with them, you give them what you can while they're there, give them a really nice goodbye, they will circle back to you. And that is pretty much prevalent in the oil and gas, certainly the contracting sector that I notice. Obviously, we want to retain people as much as we can, especially through the development, especially once they've gained a certain amount of experience, because that adds the value for the clients as well, and also people coming up behind them. But it is a challenge, no doubt about it, it's a challenge.
One of the things that I'm thinking of is what that translates to when we're talking about what we said the other day. It's no longer work-life balance, it's now work-life alignment. So when you're appealing to that future workforce, what are you seeing in the terms of the shifts of work-life alignment? What about you, Imraan, I think?
Well, I think it's completely changed. I just, the way that pre-COVID expectation has really, really shifted, and I don't think we've worked out on either side where that balance is. I think a number of people obviously have seen the merits and benefits of having a hybrid or a flexible working life, and they're trying to find somewhere in between, but they haven't quite worked out themselves what's right for them.
Yep.
And I don't think that can be. We've accelerated this largely through technology over that short period of time, and I think it's really challenging now for companies to determine what is the right path, how to please lots of different individuals, and set policy and agenda around it to find the right balance. So it's the expectation of people either coming in for limited days, excuse me, or not coming to the office at all, presents opportunities, of course, as well.
Yeah.
You've just got to find the right balance at the moment, and I think it's going to keep changing.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, right now, as somebody that's recruiting for high, tech individuals, we have to headhunt ourselves. It's not like you can just advertise. Even with the brand of Sony, you still have to reach out and try to find these people and get them to. And almost not everyone, but almost everyone, when I do a cold call, what is your flexible work policy? They want to know before they'll even talk to me what our work arrangements are.
And we were talking in the pre-session as well about the fact that there might be a real conflict here, because some of our data shows that 66% of employees say they want to work flexibly, have the choice to be hybrid or fully remote. 67% of executives actually say they think the real work will only happen in the physical office. So there's both a generational component to that and also just a mindset shift that I was surprised to see that divergence given where we are. But there's no question, I think, that according to what we're hearing, 60% of our clients are moving to hybrid. So how do you really accomplish that and still get the work done, as you're saying?
And from our experience, who would ever have thought an organisation like ours, so embedded in the office, have to be present, you're on projects for clients, they just want you there physically. And obviously overnight, we revolutionised and worked from home, and now I'd probably say from July to present day, we're probably going through a levelling of what might work and might not. We implemented hybrid working, so 50% in office. On that journey, getting all the stakeholders together from across the organisation, I'm talking the area I was working in at the time was Middle East, Africa, Europe. There was a huge divergence between the generation view on this, also just traditional views about how work should perform. And as an HR rep in that process, challenging the management structure and the employees, where you want to bring the employees back a little bit towards the middle, say, yeah, we're going to give you flex, but not complete flex, and drag the managers into thinking, well, actually, we can do this another way. And it has been a struggle, an internal struggle for the individuals, but also organisationally for us. We arrived at a good space, but the struggle's not over, and I think it will continue for a while until we really land in a comfort spot. And also the clients have an influence on this as well. We're servicing clients. If the clients want people to be present, we might have given flex, but then we might have to say, for a period, we need you back, and obviously on different cycles in projects.
Yeah.
So it's an unruly beast, I think, that we have to try and manage, and I'm sure some organisations will find it simpler. Ours is a little bit challenging, I find. Yeah.
It's largely about communication, though. You know,
Hugely.
so
Yeah.
the requirement to be able to be very upfront, to communicate, and as we don't know necessarily the structure and the styles that are in place, it becomes all the more important that there may be a change.
Yeah,
You know, we haven't, no one's really worked this out fully.
right.
So, and the communication both ways.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Imraan, because I think what we see with this next generation is that, and your life story, Emily, was a great example of this, is the desire to co-create with the senior leadership and to build an enterprise, not just receive an enterprise or
Yeah.
participate in an enterprise. So the chance to engage them, and them being whoever is expressing interest in the area of hybrid work or the redesign of work, is a wonderful opportunity to change the employment value proposition and say, here, you are not just an employee, you are a builder of this business and what we do. And I think it's also going to be very interesting to see how work itself redesigns, because the other trend that is so palpable during the pandemic was we really went out of the office and then digitalization moved in. I have CEOs saying, you know, finally everybody was out, so I could do the full soup to nuts digitalization of our workspace. So that means that the work itself is shifting, and in some cases, some jobs have been automated. And we've been looking for that for a while, but now how do we redesign people's careers in a way that recognizes that what used to be defined as a job might have changed? Now it might just be a collection of people with skills that are flexibly deployed into challenges that the workforce faces, and how do we set up the right visibility into skills to make skills the new currency of work. So it's not just jobs, it's actually jobs are backward looking. Let's look at skills and the potential to apply those skills going forward. So I think it's very exciting and extremely disruptive, particularly in technology sector, oil and gas, places where talent is scarce. We're going to see radical reinvention of jobs themselves.
But it's such an opportunity as well, and I think somebody mentioned this a little bit earlier. You know, there's so many people who haven't been able to work in the environment because the commitment to be in an office full time has just been too harsh for them personally, and it opens up the door to get more skills in that are otherwise unused, whether you consider that from a diversity aspect or other. So it's allowing us as an organisation certainly to look at a wider scope of talent pool, which we absolutely need because our talent pool feels like it's shrinking quite significantly. So it's definitely got an opportunity attached to it in a really big way for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I heard you saying the other day, Jean, was it's not just about the future generation workforce, but it's also about re-looking at the current workforce. And so one of the things that Mercer's doing, and I think a lot of organizations are doing, are focusing more on the reskilling and the upskilling and bringing everybody up to speed. And that also feeds a bit into the diversity aspect because you're sort of leveling the playing field for groups of people. There's also the ageism concept of diversity.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting approach. What have you, in terms of upskilling and reskilling, what are some of the things that you've seen that have really taken off with other generations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember the time when we used to have one training a year that we would go to offsite and a place, a hotel or something, and that is totally redesigned. So the surge in the demand to reskill accompanies very nicely the demand to have new skills in the organization. So there's an enormous chance to engage people in almost a daily learning ritual. And we're seeing companies get very creative around micro-learning. So 15-minute micro segments, micro-learning. There's a lot more technology, a lot more instructional design and educators in this area. So many companies are now saying, let's just embed learning into the workday. Let's create incentives, competitions for learning. How much did everyone learn this week becomes a new focus. And when we first started seeing it in clients, I was thinking, oh, that's actually surprising, because in a way we had moved, I think, through the heat and light of the past 10 years of economic growth. We'd moved much more toward an execution focus, which was really about apply now, get it efficient, get moving to the next task. Whereas now companies are trying to infuse all of these learning moments into the day. So I'm excited to see that. I think the very, very amazing work that's being done by groups like Opportunity at Work shows that individuals, for example, machinists, in very traditional jobs, actually can transition much easier to high-tech jobs, to very sophisticated computer systems, data science jobs, than was ever thought before. Because as you were saying, Debbie, society used to say, this is your path. But now the reskilling has come in, and we have bus drivers who are being now employed as the entry class of programmers at Microsoft. And they turned out to be the top performers in the entry-level exams. So there's something we need to change about how we understand people's skill profile and really, really take advantage of every opportunity with the workforce.
And there's a lot you can do with internal marketplaces. And there's providers out there that will take your information that you have in your HRIS system, and it links it up to your LMS or your learning system, and then it links it up and it links it up to job opportunities. So it's really a marketplace that's automated. So we were talking about digitalization earlier. It just does it all for me, and it's a unique experience for me. So the same way that when I go to Spotify and it recommends a song of a band that I've never even heard of, but based on my listening history or what so it does it with my skills, it has it with my individual development plan that I've done with my manager, and it serves up all this information, and it does it for me naturally. And where we've always struggled as HR to try to get our managers to spend the time developing a career plan for the person, AI is now doing it for companies that are progressing and using this skills cloud that kind of pulls everything together for you. So it's really, it could really go far. The other thing that we're doing is reverse mentoring, and it kind of brings that young generation with the old generation. And I'm doing it myself. I've got an intern that's at Sony right now, and I'm not great. I wasn't. I'm getting good at using more of the TikTok type stuff. And so I've had her teaching me, and I'm teaching her. So it's, she's, and I've actually had to say to her, now listen, I need you to treat me like I don't know what I'm doing, because I don't. And she loved that. And, it kind of opened it up, and it's not only helped me, but I'm helping her. So, and I would encourage anybody who's not doing a reverse mentorship program to consider doing that as well.
Yeah, and to Todd's point, the companies like Gloat, Eightfold, Hitched, a lot of these innovations that are out there now, Workday Skills Cloud's coming in, there are opportunities to really create visibility into people's profiles. And not surprisingly, a lot of the candidates that are surfacing when Todd enters his job requirements, let's say, for a particular job to be done, the candidates that show up are often more diverse than the original slate generated by the hiring managers, because we don't have that visibility in our sort of day-to-day. So I'm really optimistic about the impact of this. I think it's going to be great for people.
And you're not putting the filters in.
Right.
Yeah, you're removing that. It is more skill.
Bias,
it's more skill based, and then it ties in nicely with. I think the hybrid working model has seen significant change in the way businesses are setting tasks. And we mentioned earlier about ownership. The generational ownership piece of people potentially being a diverse workforce across numerous geographies, which brings up its own challenges. We've had a couple of instances where clients have been scaling up, private equity backed, and they've had a complete openness as to where the people are based geographically in the world. And we've put some people in from different countries which would just not be in our talent pool traditionally. And it's worked both very well, and it's presented some very significant cultural challenges. You know, the one individual within a fast scale-up, really his CFO couldn't get the fact that he wasn't at his desk for 2 hours. He's Spanish. He works a lot later into the night, you know. Whereas another company that we've done work for is they've achieved unicorn status with a staff of under 20 people, and the founders dictate that they don't need people to be present in the traditional way, because actually it is task and output led. And they have freed up the creativity and the ownership. So as opposed to having to micromanage in the old, you know, you'll be at your desk and you'll be there, they've actually freed it up, and then they combined it by leading by example, which is absolutely crucial, by doing something which I'm not very good at. I could maybe lift them and carry them, but I'm not very good at rock climbing. But they go off, the founders go off and do rock climbing in the middle of the day. And they actually actively encourage their staff to have breaks, so that they're not just, like many of us, I imagine, in this room over the last 2 years, you know, back to back, half hour, 45-minute. You curse yourself when you book in an hour meeting because you're like, I should have done it in half an hour just to get through it. But there's that intensity removed, and then people pass the baton in terms of the task of delivery, which is just a completely different way to the way we used to work.
And really, the benefit of, you know, what you're saying, it really engenders trust in an organisation, doesn't it? It's a completely different way of looking at things, and giving trust to everybody will give the goodwill back into the business, and that's such an intangible thing, which you really shouldn't undervalue. And it's, I guess, for some organisations, it's selling that concept in where naturally they're just very uncomfortable without people being either the car in the car park or the coat on the back of the chair sort of thing, which I know sounds very old-fashioned, but they're out there.
No, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the days when my boss used to track whose lights were on in their cubes or in their offices, you know, back entry level. But there's a fabulous book out right now called Work Without Jobs by Robin Jesuthason and John Boudreau. And it's really insightful around the fact that most companies now really need to take a look at what is a job, and what is the value of a job, and how do we think about what that means? Is a job 9 to 5, you know, the old definition, or is it simply finding ways to bring in, after your surfing session, some creative ideas that change the business in an energizing way? And how do we escape the old idea of a job? When I think about job descriptions, you know, it's really amazing how archaic and outdated so many of those are. So trying to focus in on redefining jobs and work without jobs, I think, is a fascinating idea.
I like how a lot of the different areas of the things we've discussed all sort of feed into this remote work and technology concept, and then also the mental health balance. And I think for me, what I've seen is that the sudden kick toward everyone needing to be remote work, we had to have technology to bring that up to speed to allow for remote work. So remote work was almost the catalyst for technology, but now we're being held accountable by the technology in some ways. And I think in some corporate cultures, there's been a creation of the e-presenteeism. So what do you do as an organization to avoid that? I mean, Imraan, you said with your example with the leaders who sort of don't require work to be in a full day, it's rather output-led. What other things do you have?
Well, they've, I think, first of all, this whole thing of people having to be there.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of research that's come out that is, you know, people when ill no longer take a sick day.
Yeah.
You know, they sit at their computer when they really should be recuperating and resting. They're working on average, I think it was something ridiculous like 28, well, was it ridiculous? Well, 28 hours extra a month. because where they should be freeing themselves up, and we work at home and we have this image of being able to go for walks or take your dogs for walks or have a different lifestyle and do the things that we want to do, and the reality is you are tied to your desk. And so it has to be back to the communication point. It comes from the leadership. And you will see in different organizations the massive differences in leadership styles within your different sects. So you get one person who's really progressive, and they have they give the ownership out, and they set high expectations, and you are held accountable still, and there's still a process for poor performance. And you've got someone else who's like micromanaging, and unfortunately, because of the way and the easy accessibility to talent now, in terms of you can get hold of people pretty much any stage of the day if you're trying to headhunt them or the rest, you lose that loyalty. And that's something that's really difficult in a hybrid working environment to gain. And it's something we've seen that's been done very successfully is when people do bring their teams together, it's actually not about work. It is fundamentally, if you're pulling people together for a work conversation, flag it as a work conversation. And the rest of the time, bring them together to build your culture, to have more of a social aspect, and the team bonding, where actually work is off the agenda.
I mean, that is a really good idea. I mean, internally with the setup we have, this sort of 50% working model, we're constantly trying to educate and communicate with our managers on, this is how you need to talk to your teams. These are the ideas for you to get your staff members on board, so they get an affiliation to you, because it's all about people, actually. It's not necessarily about the company or the branding. It's all about the relationships, and so important in our business. So we're always trying to keep the communication channels open. The flat screen is great, but the people connection is irreplaceable, actually. And I think there has been a bit of a realization in our organization from being all at home and then back into the business. Those snippets of conversations through the corridor, they mean so much, and I think we've got to keep sight of that human contact aspect, whether it's in team building or whether it's in the development piece as well, because we are using technology, but the human contact and discussion you can't take away, because the printed word is not the same as a conversation. And you tend to get so much more buy-in by maintaining a level of that. So we do have to find that balance somewhere, and we're working on it. I admit we're still working on that piece. It's going to be a process.
I want to allow just a couple of minutes for questions and see if there are any questions in the audience. Yes?
Hello, Mike Sargent again. I just wanted to ask about the balance between face-to-face training and online training. Full disclosure, I run a lot of face-to-face training sessions teaching public speaking and communication, but we've also got an online offering. So I wonder what you're seeing, and I was very interested in the point about micro-learning and those sort of trends. So could we elaborate a little bit on in this kind of hybrid digital age, what really works in terms of training and what do companies actually want to commission?
Yeah, I'll just start on the trends we're seeing in companies. Definitely lean toward the digital presently. So I would say it's nearly 90% of our companies that are investing in new L&D, digital L&D, online learning. So I do think this idea of micro-learning, even 5-minute sprints, et cetera, that can be sprinkled into the day is the new way of thinking about it. And some companies, as mentioned, even for people on the retail floor or in the factory floor, hitting an iPad and having a 5-minute or 15-minute sprint through a new concept or a new capability. I do feel executives have expressed active skepticism about the big week-long, university-based retreats being as preferred in today's fast-moving environment where we have a lot going on. That said, I also think from an L&D perspective, and I'm sure you would be even more expert on this, it's important to examine what needs to be face-to-face in training. And certainly, as Debbie was mentioning, just that network and that personal relationship that is proven in science to enhance people's learning receptivity and their learning agility, that's really important to create. So I've been watching some of these innovations where you do a micro-learning set of sprints for a week, and then you get together for 2 hours and talk about it, and it's somewhere in the city even, sometimes even cross-company, interestingly. So just everybody meet for the happy hour to talk about public speaking skills. And that allows people to get the network and the personal engagement. Some companies are doing it at the front end and the back end. But integrated hybrid training, I think, is here to stay. And we were just doing some work with Harvard University on redesigning their curriculum for that, for their executive level and professional curriculum, because it's so crucial to understand how that's going to operate. I don't know if others have experiences similar with that.
Well, I think we haven't hired, because we do most of our training internally, everything ended up being digital. And the sad thing about that is you tend to do work while the training's happening. So are you really learning anything?
Right.
We're beginning to change focus a little bit to get the more face-to-face contact back again. It's I agree with you, it's not going to take over again to the same extent we had it. But there's going to be a mix. There's no doubt there has to be. I think there has to be, actually.
Yep. And by the way, the virtual reality training is coming on real. Mersion, M-U-R-S-I-O-N, increasingly seeing that uptake in companies where you literally, through the headset, do the skill. I find that to be very much the future as well.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, and can't be multitasking, unfortunately, doing that one.
I think that wraps up our panel for today, but I do welcome anybody if you have a question and we didn't get to it. I think most of our panel will be around for the rest of the day, but if you can't address them directly with a question, feel free to find me, and I'm happy to collate those questions and chase them up for you. So thank you all very much for your time, and a special thank you to my very, very amazing panel.